I am Nail Egyptian, and I'm the owner of the Nail Egyptian Press-On Collection, and I'm originally from Compton, California. I started doing nails in high school, but I started doing press-on nails when I traveled to Ghana for the first time in 2013, which inspired me to make the Nail Egyptian Press-On Collection. The style and design behind every nail set is inspired by the queens and goddesses of ancient Africa. I love when my customers tell me they feel inspired and empowered when they wear the nails, and it makes me feel happy that I'm able to connect with people in my community and make them feel beautiful. You can also visit my website at nakedgoldonline.com. Welcome everyone, we are back. This is Griot of the Diaspora, and today's episode is going to be about colorism, and we're going to talk about how colorism shows up in abuse allegations for Black women in entertainment. Obviously, we have all seen the news in the last 2 weeks, right? We have seen the news of Keke Palmer, we have seen the news of Cassie and Diddy, and we have seen even the news of Krishan and Tamar and just a bunch of different things that have happened. And one of the things that I noticed that they all had a common denominator of was a hint of colorism. And I want to talk about that, and I want to break down just how colorism shows up. I'm not going to really get into too deep with the actual abuse allegations. I'm more so just going to focus on colorism and how audiences respond to information, and I'm also going to talk about how we interact with each other and how maybe possibly some of these women and men in these situations, how they handle situations in terms of colorism as well. So as I said earlier, there were a couple weeks ago, there have been stories regarding celebrities in entertainment. And so make sure you go to my website, nakedgoldonline.com/archives, which is where you can find the editorial essays and blogs and articles where I write about a variety of different topics from all over the world, specifically Ghana, America, the Caribbean, different places. But I have a new article up, and it's called The Cycle of Violence Against Black Women in Entertainment. And that essay is just a quick, very short synopsis of 2023 and how the abuse allegations amongst, oh, I forgot Megan. That was the other person I was thinking about earlier. How many stories have come out about Black women in the media and these abuse allegations from Megan and Tory. And so I wrote about how not only just common it is, but how Black women survivors are being treated in the process, and the discourse that's happening on social media amongst, you know, people that follow each other and amongst all of these strangers who are voicing their opinions. And it's really becoming very alarming. I'm gonna be very honest with you. Reading some of the tweets from everyone, from Black men and Black women, it's really, really alarming to see people's point of views on certain topics. I will say that. So hopefully this video, we can kind of get some understanding, and we also can kind of check ourselves to understand how colorism, misogyny, patriarchy, racism, elitism, and all these things, hopefully we can get an idea of how these things are being fed to us so that we can kind of make better decisions for ourselves and also become a better community for each other. I think a lot of times when we talk about this topic like colorism and abuse, a lot of times we don't talk about how important it is for us to actually change our mind and change how we feel about things and take time to actually sit in our emotions, and also understanding that our emotions should not be the center of the universe. You know, there's a bigger picture. And so I think You're starting to see that when all these different celebrities like Slim Thug, they're making these different comments saying they're not getting rid of their heroes. And you see Peter Guns and Rich Dollars. You see people making these comments, and all of the men who have stood up for Diddy or the men who have questioned Cassie all have abuse allegations, right? And so when we start talking about the concept of abuse allegations, domestic violence in Black entertainment, it's really alarming how majority of women at this point, in my opinion, it sounds like majority of women that we have watched on our TV screens and who we listen to in our phones, it sounds like majority of them have been abused by somebody who is either an executive or somebody who is just also another artist, or just somebody who doesn't do music and entertainment industry, but somebody that has proximity to it, or someone from their old neighborhood, right? I think that this concept is getting really, really out of hand, the way that the media has just blown up, especially considering what is happening in Gaza right now with Palestinians, the way that Black American media kind of geared up. And we had like a solid 3, 4, 5 days where a big story was plastered all over social media, and they all concerned Black women. And I think that that was very interesting. So if you look at the picture that I posted for the article, as well as most likely for the title picture for YouTube, you see a variety of women from Michelle to Halle Berry to Rihanna. You see Tina Turner. And the reason why I did that is because I really wanted to give the visual of how many Black women in our legendary space has openly talked about domestic violence and physical abuse. The women that I chose in that collage was very specific, and I'm even missing some. But I wanted to specifically talk about the women who have spoken up. I didn't want to focus too much on stories that we've heard about and things like that, not just because things are alleged, but because I want to focus on what happens when the Black woman speaks. That's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about what happens when the Black woman does speak. What is the vitriol that happens, right? And so I wrote a quick synopsis that I kind of want to read out really quick. And so this is a point that I really wanted to make. If the woman is light-skinned, attractive, thin, model-like body, people will accuse the woman of being a gold digger. They will say that's what she gets simply because men choose them. They will even feel good about themselves to know that women who fit the light-skin preferences or pretty privilege preferences still get treated like shit. For example, when you see Black women talk about Khloe Kardashian and Kim Kardashian and the Kardashians, and how people be like, yeah, they baby mamas too, they got treated like, and there's kind of this weird like rally but like when they come in unison to now, be like, yeah, that's what they get. That's what I'm talking about right now. But that is the same energy that is used to describe unambiguous Black women, because they will say, why would a man go for her? She must have trapped him, or she wanted money. And that's what people did in the Usher case, where the young lady said that he gave her herpes, and everybody automatically assumed because she was fat, or, and they felt that she wasn't pretty and she wasn't Usher's usual type, they automatically wrote it off as it was untrue, right? Y'all will even discuss young girls younger than 21 years old who are preyed upon by older men, 10 years their senior, if they are considered conventionally attractive. And so, I don't know if y'all saw this, but I saw this, but Paula J. Parker, Trudy Proud, you really showed yourself, because Paula J. Parker, who is the voice behind Trudy Proud and the Proud family, she tweeted some crazy tweets, and she basically said, Do sex slaves get to choose their sex partners in 5-star hotels? And she goes on a series of tweets where she basically says like, she just says some really crazy stuff, right? But there's a lot to be said in the Black community, how frequent and how common it is for us to have family members, men and women, who molest children, who sexually abuse children and young girls and young boys, and how a lot of times the women in the family do not protect the child. And I think that this was an example of that. Like, she really just sat there on her Twitter and was like, oh, do sex slaves get to? And to me, that's just so out of pocket. And it's not only out of pocket, but it also just shows like, because Cassie isn't the perfect victim, people are automatically like, why should I care? And I think because for some women, we kind of look at Cassie like that could have been us. But there is another side of that spectrum for women who feel like, well, that would never be me. So, and that, whatever that is, you got to figure that out. That is disgusting. I have been in a lot of situations with Black women where I have openly told them about very serious things that have happened to me, and genuinely their response was, oh, well, I mean, you're a pretty girl, so. And the context of the matter was me talking about me being followed by men in cars that were driving slow and they looked like they were about to kidnap me, right? And so I have been in that situation, in a physical, in-person situation where someone has said that to me. And so I think that that is a very, very ugly trait of our community and of the diaspora, and I think that that is really kind of gross. So I'm going to continue with what I wrote. Colorism is not our friend, and we need to end that relationship with skin complexion immediately, because abusers know that when they abuse specific women, their appearance plays a role in whether they will be believed or not. Wealthy men intentionally date younger, less stable, beautiful women and abuse them because they know beautiful women expect a caliber of men with power, so they dangle that power against them. Even if they date a popular woman, the woman usually doesn't make as much money as them. Then, regular men who date wealthy women, for example, Mary J. Blige. She was married for, I think, over a decade, and when the divorce finally happened, she finally talks about how she was physically abused, how she has to pay alimony, and all of these things. And the question still remains, how are all these men like Diddy all around, and women are being abused in every relationship that they're in, right? But now we know why. Regular men who date wealthy women like Mary J. Blige, they date wealthy women that they notice don't have money education or financial literacy. So they become their managers, or they become their financial advisors, or they start doing business with them immediately after dating. Women who don't have financial literacy can find themselves trusting the street, regular dude that they think they can relate to, but that man sees her as a lick. I want y'all to listen. When people say rich men, broke men, please remember the common denominator is men. We often see like people on social media, they're always saying like, that's why you gotta date a man that's on your level. That's why you can't date a man that make less than you. And it's like, money shouldn't be a factor in how we are treating each other. That is the number one for me. Money should not be the factor in who's the head of the household, who is being nice to who has the freedom to speak, who can make decisions on their life. I don't think that money is the factor that we should be focusing on. But somehow, so much of our culture as Black Americans, it's like we now are mixing love with sex, with money, and for me, it seems like, how is it impossible to now believe that people are just dating just to date? Now people are dating to say that they're dating somebody of a particular career. So Whether they are rich or poor, they will abuse women for a variety of reasons. There is no sole reason. Some men genuinely hate women. Some men are sexually addicted. Some men have addictions that cause disorders. Some men have disorders that heighten with drugs. Some people are secretly pimps, right? The reality is, and even though women are capable of all of those things, right, women do not have the highest statistic of killing their partners, right? And even when you look at a lot of those statistics of women who are unaliving their partners and things like that, there has been a history of abuse. Obviously, there are situations and there are other cultures, you know, where the woman is more abusive and things like that. But when I talk about specifically Black America, we have seen that a lot of the domestic violence disputes that have happened, it has been a history of it, right? And so with what I just read, connecting that to colorism, if we can understand that men can be abusive, right? Whether they have money, whether they are famous, whether they are handsome, whether they are not attractive, you know, whatever the case may be, there is still a space in the world where they can be abusive and they can get away with it. And I think in this situation with Cassie specifically, so let's get into the specific people and their dynamics, right? With Cassie specifically, Cassie is light-skinned, she's clearly mixed race, she's of Asian descent and Black descent, I believe, I don't know. But a lot of the women that Diddy have dated have been lighter skinned, non-Black women, right? Kim Porter was the darkest woman that he had ever been with publicly that we have seen. Chance's mom, Sarah Chapman, is also brown skinned, but she would be considered light skinned as well. And pretty much every other, you know, girl. Now Carisha is a brown skinned girl. She would be considered dark skinned as well. So I don't know if we can necessarily say like there's a specific colorism issue in the women that Diddy date, but I think that the way that the audience is dissecting the issue between Cassie and Diddy, a lot of it has to do with not only colorism, but also women and men who feel like people who they find conventionally attractive or pretty or ambiguous or whatever the case may be, for some reason there's a lack of sympathy there. For some reason there's a lack of understanding and there's, more importantly, there's a lack of belief that that person is really emotionally damaged and that that person has been emotionally abused. I think people think because a woman is beautiful that she automatically wants nice things and she automatically wants to live a certain type of life. And I think that a lot of times men, when they look at women, they just see what she looks like. And a lot of times what we look like does not match who we are on the inside and the things that we're interested in and the things that we like to do and talk about, right? And because there is this, you know, there's this constant need to identify ourselves, I think sometimes when we hear certain stories, when it comes to representation, that, you know, representation is what people claim they want, but then when we get representation and we don't identify with that or we can't relate to it, we still struggle with empathizing with those parts of our culture, right? I want to talk about Keke Palmer really quick. I don't want to get into the allegations and the court documents, but I do want to talk about how colorism plays a role in this case, right? Keke Palmer being a dark-skinned woman and her baby daddy being someone that is not only light-skinned, but also, from my understanding, he's Panamanian. So similar to like the conversation that we had about Tyler, you can be Panamanian and that doesn't necessarily mean that you're Afro-Panamanian. It doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, that you specifically identify as Black. So I don't know what they identify as in terms of ethnic group. Darius Jackson and Saronis Jackson, his brother. I have only heard Saronis on podcasts say that he is Panamanian. Right? I believe on the podcast See the Thing Is with Bridget and Mandy B, he said like I'm Panamanian, and he also spoke about, I believe he spoke about identifying as Black, but he also identifies as Panamanian. And so I want to talk about that because when Keke Palmer first brought to the scene that she was with Darius, a lot of the comments talked about how they just automatically assumed he was broke. They automatically assumed that he was working for her, mainly because once people found out that he was the brother of Sarunas and that he didn't necessarily have his own thing, he wasn't popular, he wasn't well known, he didn't have necessarily his own business or anything in comparison to his brother, let alone Keke Palmer, right? And I think that also played a role in the fact that he is light-skinned and that people view light-skinned men as docile and pretty boys and soft and feminine, and they think that, a lot of people think that like light-skinned men like want to be pampered. And so when I look at the way that Darius Jackson asserts himself in conversations with Keke's mom and on Twitter and the text messages that have been exposed, I can't help but to see a boy who struggles with people thinking that he's soft, and he's had to build this masculine ideology and this masculine mindset, and he's had to assert it in such an aggressive way, and he's like overcompensating for who he really is because people automatically look at him like he's soft. That's what I see, just based off of the tweets, the way that he says, I'm gonna teach my son to be a man. I'm gonna teach my son to be a man. He says, I'm gonna teach my son how to be a real man. In those videos that were posted between him and Keke Palmer's mother and Keke Palmer while they were on the phone, I think that plays a role. And I also feel like because Keke is dark-skinned, when the news initially came out, I noticed how a lot of women automatically was like, oh my God, Keke's telling the truth. And then a lot of men and a lot of women were automatically like, I don't know, I've heard that she's been abusive in her relationships before. And there was a lot of like backlash. And I just was very curious, like, if Keke was light-skinned and Darius was dark-skinned, how would that change the narrative? Because Keke is the breadwinner and she's dark-skinned, it's like people automatically look at Keke as somebody who is capable of being super abusive. Now, this isn't to say that she could be, but I'm saying even with the information that we had, people were very quick to assume that she was lying. And this also brings up the situation with Megan and Tory. I think that even with that situation, right, when Megan said, Tory shot me, immediately, black men on Twitter, they brought up Megan's height. They immediately said, well, Megan is way bigger than Tory. She way taller than Tory, and she thicker than him. And they automatically found something to say that they could understand how a situation can happen where a man needs to shoot a woman after leaving Kylie Jenner's house. I found that to be very interesting because Megan is a brown-skinned woman, Tory is a brown-skinned man. And so there wasn't a lot of colorism opportunity to dissect from their situation because they're fairly the same color. So when you really break down the way that people find things, that's how colorism shows up, or featureism shows up, or misogyny shows up. When people use these very minuscule differences between the two people and use that as an excuse as to how something could happen. Megan's height should have never been a conversation in the case of whether he shot her or not. And somehow, on multiple black male podcasts, that was a conversation, was that if there was a scuffle between them, Megan's taller than him. And I think that in some, it might not be colorism, but it shows how when colorism isn't even present, how there will still be something based off of your features. It will be your height, it will be your weight, it will be your hair, it will be your skin tone, it will be the way that you speak. It will be something that people will identify as, this is a negative part of this person that could have intimidated this person, right? When we talk about these different cases, there is always the concept of intimidation. When we talk about Diddy and Cassie, Diddy is intimidating Cassie, right? But because he is wealthy, he's able to get away with it, right? When we talk about the situation with Kiki and Darius, people assume that because Kiki is the breadwinner, that she's the abusee, because people naturally think that the person that is doing the abusing is the person who has the most power. And what people are missing is that it's not always about who has the most power. A lot of times, it's simply about gender. A lot of times, it's simply about gender. Tory didn't have more power than Meg in the public opinion, but Tory had a longevity in the industry longer than Megan Thee Stallion. So even in that case, Megan probably had equal to or more money than Tory Lanez had at the time of that shooting. What was the power dynamic there, right? The power dynamic there was simply gender. And so I think when we look at abuse allegations and we talk about them, whether you're a blogger, whether you're just the audience or you're a writer, you know, I think that a lot of us, we need to pay close attention to the way that colorism, featureism, misogyny, misogynoir, how those things show up in our language when we talk about these things. Because a lot of times we're talking about things from a space of, well, I look like this, so I can't relate to that. Or, oh, she looks like me, so that could have been me. Or, oh, well, no man like that has ever chosen me before, so I don't know. I don't put myself in those situations. That is not positive, and that does not help. And to die on that hill is a very crazy hill to die on, honestly. And so, like I said at the top of this video, hopefully this video just gives people an opportunity to realize how colorism and featureism and texturism and those things, how those things show up when we are engaging with abuse allegations or domestic violence allegations in our own lives, but also when we are talking about what's happening in popular culture and in Black entertainment. I really think that I really enjoy watching other YouTubers like Jessie Woo, because some people actually talk about these different things, as well as like Dr. Sarah L. Webb. She's also on YouTube, where we kind of talk about like how colorism plays a role. A lot of times we don't talk about it. We just say things like what Paula J. Parker said on Twitter, right? And anybody that has been Black their entire life can read Paula J. Parker's tweets and say, there's jealousy in there, there's envy in there, there's colorism in there, there is issues with not feeling pretty enough in there, there are issues with not understanding other women's struggles. Her tweets just kind of showed a very ugly side of how Black women can show up. So hopefully this video gives people the opportunity to kind of think differently and just kind of check yourself, right? So make sure you tune in for the next episode. Thank you so much for watching. Definitely comment below. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any questions, always feel free to put them in the comments below or reach out to me via email or on Instagram. And check out my website, www.nakedgoldonline.com.